one of my favorite cast members from Love is Blind, Nancy Rodriguez.
It was a leap of faith that I was willing to take on love, specifically, like, is love truly blind?
He was talking about how Raven was more of his type. What was it that kept you that pumped?
That was me being confident within myself. Yes, she's hot, but I'm hot too. The way I thought of it was, I already love myself enough. Do I need you to validate me as a partner? Yes. Is it required for me to feel good about myself? No.
What up, y'all? I hope you're all having a really great 2023 so far. Today, I'm going to be joined by one of the cast members of Netflix's Love is Blind Season 3. If you're not familiar with Love is Blind, it's a show that gives strangers a chance to get to know each other and fall in love without ever seeing each other. I love this show, you guys. Some couples get married and some of them don't. We're going to get into everything from dating a younger man to lessons learned from the show. So stay tuned. This is Chiquis and Chill. So as promised, we have one of my favorite cast members from Love is Blind with me right now. It's none other than Nancy Rodriguez. She's a speech language pathologist and a real estate investor. So welcome, Nancy. I am so excited to have you. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I am so good. Honestly, I just feel like it's one thing to envision, like, oh, what's going to happen, after we've been waiting for so long for the show to air. But there's no way that I could have imagined this, or even like the feeling of so much love. Like, I never thought that that was a thing. And I'm just so thankful that it has been such a positive experience for me. And overall, like my family, my friends, I just feel so loved.
That's so good. You are loved. I definitely love you. You're one of my favorites.
Thank you.
You really, really are. And which is why I was like, I need to talk to her. I have so many questions. You're Latina. I thought your mom was super badass on the show. Your brothers too. So it was nice to see that. And so thank you for allowing us to, see your life. I'm a huge fan of the show. And I think that love can really be blind. Do you feel like love is blind?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, like the concept of going on a reality TV show was never really my agenda. It was not like, oh, one day I want to be on a reality TV show. So for me, it was specifically Love is Blind. And it was the fact that it was a social experiment. The concept of it, I watched season 1. That's the only season we had access to. So just watching season 1 and knowing that I could potentially be a part of this, like it was truly just a leap of faith that I was willing to take on love, and specifically, like, is love truly blind,
Yeah. No, I think the experiment is amazing. And whoever invented this, I think it's great. I've learned so much. I've watched all 3 seasons. So I have really enjoyed it. We'll get into the relationship with Bartise. I know there were some lessons that you learned while on the show, but I want to start with something you mentioned in the first episode. You said you wanted to find a husband and wanted to start a family. And you said that some people have asked you when you're going to have kids, and sometimes they assume that something's wrong with you. That's something Latinas deal with. Like, what can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think for my background specifically, I'm the only girl, 3 boys in my immediate family. And then I do have girl cousins and guy cousins. So we are a big family overall. So I think for me, I did a lot of first things. So like I was, first generation to graduate high school, first generation to go to college, and then finish and then get hired to. So I always had this like first kind of experience in my family. And so I think for me, it was like, I'm doing all these first things, but at the same time, the pressure from my aunts and uncles of, oh, but you're 20 now. So like, when are you going to get married? And then, the next questions come about. So I think just really finding it to where I knew my identity came from my experiences and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, and not necessarily the pressure of that question at the birthday party or the bautismo or the, whatever gathering we had together as a family. And so it's funny because as the years went by and I started acquiring more properties in my real estate portfolio, and we'd go to like, I don't know, a quinceañera or something, and I'd have a tia ask me like, oh, so what's going on with your relationship status? I'd be like, or when are you having kids? I'd be like, well, I have 2 properties now, so those are my kids. And then the next year would be like, oh, well, now I have 3 kids because I have 3 houses. And, and so I think for me, it's just kind of, it was an interesting upbringing because it was really that pressure from the family side, but then also knowing where I stood and what I believed in and what I wanted for myself. And that didn't necessarily line up with what my family was asking me about or wanted me to.
Right. I love that answer. And that's crazy because, I mean, I get that question all the time from family. It stopped from family a long time ago, but like in interviews and when are you going to have kids? And it's like for a long time, I felt that pressure. I was just talking about it. And now, like, you know what? Wait, I'm busy doing other things and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that decision. And I love to hear that from you because you feel the same way. Like, I'm accomplishing things and I'm good with that. And when it's time to have kids, that'll happen. And I love that about you. That's another thing. I was like, she's a freaking intelligent woman. And I love that. I love to see that you were like on your shit. So I was like, you know, shout out to you. I want to give you a round of applause because I think that's awesome. That's one of my goals this year. It's to invest in properties. And I think it's time. You know what I mean? And stop spending money on all these other things.
Yes. And I think that's one thing too, like, again, being a first in my family to do so many other accomplishments that I found valuable. I think like as the years went on, I was now being praised by my family or my cousins or the women in my family to be like, oh, mírala, está, viajando por acá. She's in Bali in Indonesia, but she's also buying property. So really just opening up that avenue for my family and for my cousins, my younger cousins now to be traveling, and my cousins now like seeing that like we don't have to keep the same tradition. And if those cousins want to keep the same tradition, that's great too. But it's kind of like stand for what you want and really just push through. And if that's acquiring, properties, and I think that's a great avenue, but it could be something else. It could be traveling. It could be just doing the things that maybe we weren't surrounded with as a Latino culture. And then just exploring whatever that adventure could be.
Right. I completely agree with you. And okay, so now we're going to get into Bartise. Spoiler alert, you guys, for anyone that hasn't watched the show. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been. But you and Bartise were engaged, but didn't get married. And he was the one that said no at the altar. And you also said that you trusted your gut. Did it make you second guess your gut? Or is that something like that you struggle with like now meeting other men? Or how do you feel about that experience? Because I'm going to tell you straight up, I didn't think that he was going to say no towards the end, especially when you gave him that beautiful gift. And I think it touched his heart and he cried. So I was very surprised. I was very upset. But anyways.
Yeah, no, I think that the way that our relationship unraveled, it truly was 1 hour together was like dating for 2 weeks. And so imagine 10 hours together, it's like dating 6 months. So every day that we were dating, we were not just normally dating, we were dating with the intention of potentially getting married. And so we had our ups and our downs. And at the beginning of our relationship, a couple weeks in, off camera, I set him aside and I said, I'm going to say no to you. You're not the person that I wanted to envision, like the person that you promised me to be, that you were supposed to make me feel safe and comfortable. And as my partner, as my best friend, my future husband, this is not who I'm getting. So I'm saying no at the altar. And he asked me for a second chance. And I think in that moment for me, like we've all been there in relationships, whether they're platonic, friendship, families, where people make mistakes and they want to learn from them and they want to grow from them. So I'm a big believer of giving someone a second chance and not holding anything back, like truly giving them a clean plate as a second chance, not, oh, here's a second chance, but I'm also going to bring stuff up from the past, truly second chance. So the last 2 weeks of leading up into the wedding, it was all positive. Everything that you got to see from us, private lessons dancing and having the best dates off camera, just really building and nurturing our relationship together. That's the feeling that I got leading up to the wedding day. So when he said no, it wasn't so much that he said no because I knew it was a chance. It was the fact that he led me to believe that he was going to say yes. And any of the doubts that he had at the beginning, he had specifically told me, I no longer have those concerns. You are the person that I see myself with. This is the husband that you're going to get. So I think for me, it was that feeling of being blindsided and not almost like asking myself, like, how could I be so smart? But then also like, how could I let myself down to not know that this man was blindsiding me this whole time, right? And so I think I really took that to heart, like after the show, really the recovery part of like the heartbreak was just making sure that I was more in tune with like what I was feeling. And if there were doubts with people I was dating or seeing, or first date, second date, just really channeling with like how I felt. And one thing my therapist said to me, she said, going on your dates, you need to ask yourself, how do I feel about this person? Does Nancy like how this date is going? Does Nancy like the characteristics of this person? Not so much like, oh, I wonder if he likes me. Because I think a lot of the times, first, second dates, like you want to show your best. And so you're maybe asking yourself, at least I was asking myself, I wonder if he likes me, or I wonder if he thinks I'm funny and all these. But I'm like, no, like I got to the point after the show where I really asked myself the opposite of, how do I feel? And like, do I find them funny? And like, do I like them? And how do I feel about them? Because I think that really will tell you a lot at the beginning. So I had, several first dates, and then that was it, because I'm like, yeah, no, it's not for me. Like, thank you, but it's not for me. And I think I learned that a lot from the show, being that it was a very fast relationship that, was sped up. But I think that just overall learning more about my boundaries and what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with is what I got from dating on Love is Blind.
Do you feel that maybe those last 2 weeks, like I don't know if, for the lack of a better word, he bamboozled you? Like maybe, like, do you feel that it was fake? Like he wanted you to like switch around to saying yes so that he could say no? Or do you think it just, like, did you ever get a why from him? Like, what the heck?
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever got a why from him, because I do want to believe that he loved me.
Yeah.
Because I think that there were moments off camera that were so pure, that were so normal for us. Like, aside from being like 7 years apart, right? Aside from being, or 6 or 7 years, aside from dating on a show like Love is Blind, like we truly enjoyed each other and we matched each other's energy so well that I want to believe that he really did give it his all the last 2 weeks. And the one thing I heard him say in an interview, not to my face, but in an interview, was something like, had we had more time, like had we had 2 more weeks of the last 2 weeks we had, my answer would have been different. For me, it was, hearing that was like, okay, like I do understand that the last 2 weeks were good, and that's what I was going off of, because again, giving you a second chance, I was letting go anything else.
I want to talk to you about red flags, because red flags is something that I've talked about a lot on this show, because I was in a pretty difficult and somewhat toxic relationship. So that relationship taught me red flags and not to ignore them, because I got a lot of them and I just chose to ignore them, because sometimes it's like, okay, well, we love this person, or we choose to look past certain things. And looking back at your experience, were there any red flags that you think you missed?
It's funny, because I think in that moment filming the show, what I saw as a weakness of his, I wanted to embrace. And I think for me, the way I thought of it was, whatever love I have from you, or whatever love we can have together, is extra for me. Like, I already love myself enough. So like, do I need you to validate me like as a partner? Yes. But is it required for me to feel good about myself? No. So I think for me, it was really just embracing him for his weaknesses, loving him through that, and really loving him unconditionally, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think like that's the approach that I had when I was in the show, when I was like, okay, we're engaged. We made each other a promise. Not only did you make me a promise, but I accepted your promise as a proposal, right? So I think for me in the show, it was really, there were red flags, but I chose to follow the green flags, and I chose to follow the actions that were lining up with the green flags. And I think a lot of the times, like in any relationship, we talk about red flags, but there's also green flags that I think that we can also use as I guess a metric, right? I think what was really neat about watching it back, it was a completely different view for me. Because when I watched the show, not only was I watching it under the perspective of how am I in a relationship, because that's really neat. Like, I think if anybody had a chance to like have somebody film your relationship and see what you're like, it's actually a really cool like situation. And so what I learned from that is I had a different perspective. I should have asked more questions, right? Like when there were differences that we had, like I should have stood up for myself and inquired more, because I think instead of just embracing him and loving him unconditionally when I wasn't getting that in return. I think that's where my boundary wasn't there. I should have asked more questions, and I should have stood up for myself in the sense that, you know, at reunion, I told him what you said was disrespectful, and you guys didn't get to see all of our conversation at reunion, but I did say everything to him that I was in my heart after watching the entire show. I said to him what I felt, that I felt disrespected. I felt like he didn't handle the delivery of his feelings. His feelings are fine. Like, have your feelings, have your thoughts, but the delivery of it was really not okay. And so I wish I would have said that to him in our relationship, because I think that maybe that could have allowed us to grow more as a couple and allowed him to learn. But I think at the same time, like, I don't think he was ready to learn. I don't know if he was in a place where he truly wanted to accept that as feedback. So I think for me, I just took it as like, look, this is a safe space. Say what you're going to say. Yes, it will probably be disrespectful because you're still learning on how to deliver. But overall, like, I wanted us to have a relationship that was open and honest as much as it was in the pods. I wanted to create that same environment outside of the pods.
This is a really weird question, but do you know his sign by any chance, like his horoscope?
He's a Cancer.
Oh, shit.
And I'm a Scorpio, and I like Cancers and Scorpios are like, they're a thing. Yeah. They're so compatible. So, yeah.
Do you think it had to do with the age? Is that like, you think the fact that he was 25? Because I have my own opinion on that as far as like a man in his 20s, because granted, my boyfriend's 7 years younger. He's 30. I'm 37. But I feel like a man has to go through certain stuff, certain things, experience certain things in their 20s in order to figure out what they really want. I feel like not only just men, women, I feel that we just need to use our 20s to learn and experience and experiment. I don't know. Do you think it had to do with his age? Did that ever scare you?
I think, yeah, at the beginning, it definitely scared me. Like, if I had allowed the age factor to really be a factor, I would have said no to his engagement, to his proposal. Like, I just know that my parents have a big age gap.
Okay.
And so, like, I knew that age really didn't need to be a factor. And I actually didn't know he was 25 until the day before he proposed.
Okay.
So I had already started falling in love with this person. And when I found out his age, I remember I was like, well, let me take a guess. And I said 1985. And it was like dead silent. And he was, and so even just like the fact that I had no idea, because the way he carried himself in the pods, like I really thought he was more mature.
Same.
I think what happened, at least throughout the process, I think that when you say like love is blind, I think that is true up to a certain point. So I think that love is blind in the pods if you can connect emotionally with someone. I think what happened in his case is that in the real world, he allowed other factors to come into his opinion. So I don't know if he was mentally, emotionally strong enough to hold on to like what really brought us together. And I think that maybe because I was 31 at the time, I had already knew and loved myself so much that I'm like, anything I get from you is extra. So like, we can make this work. Like, we can work through our differences, and we can really pull through. So I think he still wasn't able to get to that point because of other factors that he was influenced by, whether it was his peers, his friends, scrolling through social media. That was one thing. We got our phones in our hand when we were coming back to Dallas from Malibu. And it was like, I got this weird feeling that I ended up asking. I was like, do you feel like the whole type thing, me not being your type, came from you scrolling on the internet and seeing tall blondes? And he said, yeah. He's like, yeah, that's part of it. So I'm like, okay, I could scroll through my feed and see hot guys, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I wish that was my husband. Because like, I know, you know what I mean? Like, so I think, again, like the influences of the outside world really impacting, I think, his opinions still. And maybe when he gets to a point where he's mature enough to hold his true value for himself and truly love on himself for who he is and not the extra stuff and not let the external things impact him, I think maybe then things could have been different.
Right, now that you brought that up, I do remember feeling like when you guys were in the pods, I'm like, he seems like such a mature, intelligent 25-year-old. And I think that that's when he, you know, when he, like you said, when he went out to the real world, it was like, I think he was his true self in the pods. And then like, that's his true essence is what I felt. And then he went out and he just was like hit with just so many things and different opinions. And it kind of just rattled him is kind of how I saw it, because I saw a different person. And I'm like, what? Like, I was like, I could have bet money that he wasn't this dude. And this is not to talk crap about Bartise, because I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure that he learned a lot of lessons himself through this process, I hope. But I was like, what the hell? Especially when, and I don't know if this is out of line and you tell me, but like, because I don't want to talk about anything you wouldn't want to talk about, but when you guys were in bed and he was talking about how Raven was more of his type, and you were just listening, like you took that so well. And I want to ask you as a woman, do you feel like, and I don't know, maybe they didn't show that part, but you were just very quiet and it felt like she's observing, she's taking it all in, she's thinking. And maybe this is me being immature, I probably would have slapped him, to be honest. Like, don't disrespect me, but I'm like, I want to know, is it because you love yourself? Is it how confident you are? Is it like, what was it that kept you that calm? Because I admire it. It's admirable.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Honestly, I pride myself in being a good listener, and that's something that I've worked really hard to do, whether it's listening to my friends or the person that I'm dating, like just truly soaking in what they're saying and allowing that to be a safe space. So I think in that moment, I had only known this guy physically for days. And so I knew that, like, although he wasn't a long-term friend, right, or a long-term relationship, like, I just knew that I needed to create a space for him to be able to say what he needed to say. And then the next day, we actually had a follow-up conversation about that particular conversation and like what it meant for him to have these feelings for someone else and what that really meant. But at the end of the day, like looking back again, watching it, I got a different perspective, because watching it back, like that was me being solid and confident within myself. And so like I knew, like, yes, she's hot, but I'm hot too. So what are we going to do? Like there's like nothing to be done about that. So like, yeah, I'm unbothered by it. So I will, at the party, I will have burgers and I will have like, I will enjoy myself. Like, I was hungry and we were drinking. So like, I just knew that like it didn't faze me. And I think that that's something that when people have asked me before, like, would you recommend someone going on Love is Blind? I do think that it is a process that is much deeper than what you think is like on TV. I learned so much about myself, but I truly would recommend anyone who goes on the show to really check in with yourself and be in tune with who you are and how much do you love yourself, and making sure that you're not looking for that validation from elsewhere, because I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Yeah, you know what? I think a lot of us can learn quite a bit from you, Nancy. And I love what you just said. Like saying, yeah, she's a hot girl, but so am I. I know my value. I know what I bring to the table. I love that. And have you ever dated a younger guy?
No, that was my first. And it's funny because I joke about it like, never again. Because you don't know what could happen, but literally like never again. Only because I'm 33 now, so it's like there are things that I accepted in that relationship that I will not accept in my future relationships. And so I think if I didn't learn from that relationship, what am I doing? Like, why would I make, the same mistakes and whatnot? So I'm single, I'm open to dating. I've got so many really cool plans coming up. And so I just feel like I'm excited to start dating again, but at the same time, like, we're putting boundaries up.
Exactly. I think that's important from the beginning. Just saying, hey, this is what I'm okay with and I'm not okay with this. And it's just like, so we don't waste each other's time. It's kind of like when we get to this age, I feel like, let's just put it out there, Yeah. Are you guys friends, you and Bartise? Do you guys have any, do you guys talk at all or no?
I definitely would not say we're friends. And that's something that in the last year and a half, like, we have tried to be friends. And we just know that at the end of the day with this new, like when the show actually dropped, it was more of like, okay, no one else is going to know our relationship except for us. So we did come in contact again, more of like, hey, pulse check, like, how are you? He was getting a lot of hate. And so even me just checking in on him for that, like, are you okay? And he'd be like, no, not today. And I'm like, okay, well, talk to me, like, what's going on? But then the next day, or a few days go by and we're still checking in on each other back and forth. But really just for that, I think talking terms is the best way to put it. But to say friends, like being friends with my ex is going to do, in this particular case, will do nothing for me for my future. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it like that, but like, how is me being friends with you going to help me with my career? How is it going to help me with my dating? Like, if anything, that's baggage. So like, you know, I'm here to cheer him on from afar and wish the best for him, but definitely not friends.
Yeah, you can care about people from afar. So I did hear that you donated your eggs in grad school.
Yeah, I did it in San Francisco. So I think every state might be different. So basically, a total of 8 times is what I donated my eggs for. And so, yeah, it was in grad school. I want to say that like I might have done the last 2 when I left grad school. So I was already out of school and I think I had flown back. I want to say that's actually what happened is I flew back after I left San Francisco to do like another cycle, a couple more cycles with the company.
Oh, I see. Okay. Do they inform you once like those eggs are fertilized or no? Like you just donate those eggs and that's it, you're done with it?
Yeah, so once I donate, when it's called a retrieval. So once the retrieval happens and the eggs are given to the family, if the family is currently in the IVF process, that means that they have to take my eggs, and I hope I'm not sure if I'm getting the terminology right, but essentially they have to fertilize the embryos if that's what they want. If the family wants to sync up not only my cycle and the retrieval, but also with them, and then they would have in vitro happen there. Now, out of like, let's say they were able to extract 20 eggs. From those 20 eggs, only maybe 18 of them might be viable eggs to be able to be fertilized. And then from there, then the family can decide, well, how, you know, you only fertilize one because you don't want to fertilize all of them. And then, so essentially it's really up to the families what they do. And I don't know any of this. Whenever I get the information back to me is if the family chooses to send me a letter or have the agency contact me and say, hey, by the way, the family has had a baby. It's been 6 months, you know, it was a boy. So I only got about 2 of the calls after I donated months later, like what actually happened. But the families have options, like either they fertilize there, like in that moment when they get the eggs. They can also freeze some of the eggs if they want to have siblings. They can also donate to research or discard them. So there are options of what the families can do with the, like I said, 20 eggs, and let's say 18 are viable. So it just kind of depends on that. And I think one of the things too, and I know this is kind of random, but on my YouTube channel, like when I talk about like my real estate, I also want to be talking about these topics because I do think it's important. One, in the Latina culture, like it's just not common to have these conversations. And I think like, if anything, if it's wanting to freeze your eggs, what does that look like? If you're wanting to be a donor, what does that look like? And I just think having a long form platform is a really great way to get this information out from my experiences and like what are options that are out there for people.
Why did you decide to donate?
Yeah, so initially I had gotten into grad school, and at this time it was the first semester, and I was going into my second semester, and I knew that I still had like funds to like have to pay for school. And so I went on the school's website. Honestly, it was as easy as that. They had like a jobs for like students, like whether you wanted to be a nanny or like other odd jobs that you could work at that either local San Francisco people would post on there. So it was a job Google search, I guess. And there was an ad for egg donating. And that was like my first question of like, wait, like people, I know there was like sperm banks, but I didn't know like egg donating was even a thing. So I went through the process of inquiring like, well, do I even qualify? Like, what is this process? And I learned so much, even just from the interview process, about genetic testing. And I learned about the likelihood of like, what are the risks and what are the benefits and what kinds of families are a part of this community. And it, you know, even just learning that it could be like a same-sex couple family, or it could be a single parent, or it can be a family that has been struggling to have children. So even just learning about that, although it started from a job post like on my school's website, it really just carried through so much more. And it is, for that particular company, they're very stringent on their process of getting applicants to be donors. So by like 3 months in, I had so many interviews, psychological testing, genetic testing, that you can still say no at any point. Even if I was selected and there was a family waiting for me, I could still say no before I go through the process. So I think just really learning about the impact that it would have on the lives of a family, just even one family, even if I only got chosen once, I just knew that that was something that was in my heart to like still do.
Oh, so you guys, she's single. She's single. I don't know. She said she's kind of ready to mingle, but has boundaries now, which I think is good as well. I think boundaries are good in every relationship, friendships, families.
Definitely.
So anyways, I did want to ask you, like, I mean, we've talked about it like throughout our conversation, but is there anything like that you would like to tell people, like what you learned, like the biggest lesson that you learned in this process, in this experiment with Love is Blind?
Yeah, it's one thing to feel self-love, and it's one thing to know like, oh, I love myself, and to say it, but to actually watch myself go through that process of falling in love and it being extra love, and then getting my heart broken, but he didn't break me. You know, like I think one thing that I learned from this experience is that Bartise and I will always have our love story, but he is not my life story. And so I think that that's something like when you're getting through a heartbreak, like I went through the natural stages of a heartbreak afterwards, and whether it was crying out of nowhere or not having an appetite or finding, you know, what made me happy again, whether it was dancing or working out or being busy or traveling, like I think just really remembering that some people come into our lives for a period of time. And I would hope that our relationship really just shed some light in how you can have like respectful conversations when there are big differences, right? Whether it was a conversation about family planning or the conversation about financial planning, that was a big, you know,
that was a good one too.
That was a big one too for us. And so I just hope that looking back, people can really embrace themselves and love on themselves harder than anyone else, because any extra love that is given or received should be extra. And I think that's the cherry on top, is like find it first within yourself. And even if you have harder days, like there are harder days, and that's okay too. But understanding that the big picture is that you were there for you first, and then anything else is extra from other people.
Completely agree. The way my mom would put it was, you have your plate and you are the plate, and you have your protein and your carbs and your greens, and then that person, that partner is just dessert, is how she used to put it. Like, that's just your dessert. It's not your full course meal. And it's like, it's true. And I just want to say thank you once again. I appreciate it. And now, I mean, I'm sure people would love to follow you on social media. Do you want to share like your YouTube channel, like all that good stuff, so people can follow you and, you know, stay connected?
Yeah, I'm super excited for my YouTube channel. The handle is Nancy Rodriguez Life. And I really keep it like that because the goal of my long form platform on YouTube is going to be to educate on the different things that I've gone through in my life, and like what things have made me successful in real estate, what things have made me successful in my profession as a speech pathologist. Also, what hasn't worked, right? Because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And then my Instagram and my TikTok will just also have some of that short form content. So that's the Nancy Rodriguez are those handles. But I'm excited to just continue to grow my channel on YouTube. And I think if anything, like it'll be more of that community oriented, like content made for you all as my followers, as my listeners. So I just thank you so much for giving me this platform to, you know, share my story from the show. But again, like it's a part of my love story, but it's not my life story. So that's where the rest of social media will really come in, is continue to follow me, because there's so much more to learn about where I've come from. And I'm excited about the real estate stuff, financial conversations. Like, let's talk money and make that like a normal type of conversation amongst the Latino community, amongst women of color. and then just young people, right? Like our generation and what it means to be in this society. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And you guys can binge and watch all 12 episodes of Love is Blind Season 3 on Netflix. And before we close out today's episode, let's get into our motivational quote. You deserve a love that you don't have to question is the quote. You deserve a love that you don't have to question. And I have one more just because I was feeling very inspired. You know what is sexier than a bad boy? A grown-ass man with his shit together. Those are the two I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Nancy, thank you so much, Nancy. Honestly, tell your family I said hello, your mom and your brothers, and I will be tuning in to your YouTube channel and all that good stuff. So again, thank you. Everyone, thank you for listening. Los quiero mucho. Les mando muchos besos. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Do you need advice on love, relationships, health, y más? I'm so excited to share with you that my Chiquis and Chill podcast will have an extra episode drop each week. I'll be answering all your questions. Just leave me a voice message con todas tus preguntas y yo te las voy a contestar personalmente. All you have to do is go to speakpipe.com/Chiquis and Chill podcast and record your questions. I can't wait to hear from you. This is a production of iHeartRadio and the My Cultura Podcast Network. Follow us on Instagram at My Cultura Podcast and follow me, Chiquis, that's CHIQUIS. For more podcasts from iHeart, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.